Hi everyone, and welcome to the April Lunch and Learn session by Women in Tech, the Netherlands. My name is Cristina Garcia. I'm a productivity engineer at ASML, and I'm also part of the Women in Tech, the Netherlands tribe. And also, I'm the host of the Lunch and Learn sessions for the 2023. I'm really happy to be here with all of you. So today is 25th of April, so I also would like to mention that is the Girls' Day in IT. So I think this Lunch and Learn session is a good celebration for that. So I hope you enjoyed. Moving forward to the session that we call Navigating Your Professional Career, we have a really special guest. So her name is Caroline Dowling. I hope I pronounced well the surname. Once I introduce her a bit, you will understand why she is a perfect fit for this topic. So Caroline has 20 years of global leadership coaching and operations experience in tech. She has led global operations and project teams across finance, customer service, people operations, fraud prevention, or field services. She is currently the director of global strategy, site strategy based in Google Ireland, a company that she joined back in 2003. Apart from all this background, she's also a certified coach. If we talk about work, she values learning, adventure, independence, and also relationships. And if we move a bit more for the personal side, we can mention about her passion for traveling, cooking, reading, family, and of course, friends. I would like to say hello to Caroline. So, hello, Caroline.
Hello.
Really happy to have you here with us today.
Hi, Christina. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here with you.
Yeah, and before we start this conversation, I would like to mention to the audience that you can write your questions, comments in the chat. We will try to pick them at the end of the session, but yeah, feel free to comment, to ask. So we will try to reach as much questions as possible in the time we have. I start to see some highs in the chat, so let's see how it goes. So, as I said, the topic of today is navigating your professional career, and we have here Caroline with 20 years of experience. So, let's go for it. The first question is a bit the mandatory question for this Lunch and Learn session 2023. And today with a bit of a special approach. So, by definition, Caroline, you are not a tech specialist, but as I said, you have 20 years career experience inside Google that actually is one of the most big and well-known tech companies in the world. So what does technology mean for you? And also I would like to know if the definition has evolved and changed during your professional career.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And I see people are joining us from Cambridge and Malaysia and Leeds and Morocco. This is just fantastic. So wonderful to be with you all from Ireland today. And so, yeah, look, I was starting my career 20 years ago, and tech and technology was very different 20 years ago, as you all know, and it's changing by the day. And so, I think if I think back 20 years ago, Google and search was just a startup. We didn't really have any idea of what was going to be ahead of us, I guess, right? And how technology would change the world in the way that it has. So I think for me personally, it was just this opportunity to do something that I was interested in. I was always passionate about helping people, customers, and that was the opportunity that really led me into this space. So as you said, I'm not like many of you, I'm not sort of classically trained in technology. And so how has tech really evolved, I guess, through that time? Well, I think each of you probably has your own perspectives in the areas that you work in, but there's no separating tech and non-tech anymore. It just is part of our lives. And I think if you asked me 20 years ago, I would have said, "Oh, I'm not a tech person. I'm not technology forward." But now it's everywhere. We're having this call. Our phones are with us. My kids are involved in it. So it's just a part of life now, and we have to embrace it, and we do embrace it, particularly in this space. So hope that's helpful, but I think it's just a part of our life.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that I hope we will touch in the in the coming questions, but of this conversation. But I would like to highlight that like technology is part of our lives and it's everywhere nowadays. So it's difficult to don't have a opinion or a relationship with technology. It could be better or worse, but yeah, it's going to be there. Thank you for that. So now I would like to move to another topic. So for the new generations and looking around nowadays, I think it's difficult to understand the idea of being 20 years connected to the same company. Even for me right now, I'm just starting my career. Looks like impossible, no? Like, oh my God, like 20 years. So but yeah, you have done it. So what could you say about your own growing process experience inside the company?
Yeah. I mean, look, if I think back on 20 years, it's hard to even imagine myself, I think. But and look, when I finished high school, I wanted to be a firefighter, right? I wanted to help people. I liked the adventure aspect. When I went then to college to study business and sociology, again, it was really about the people. And I studied law after that. And um, I don't know. So I didn't set out to work in the one company for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
I think that might have been how people thought about their careers like 40 years ago, maybe. It's not how I set out. And even when I joined Google back 20 years ago, I was thinking I wanted to earn some money and emigrate to Australia. Like that was my plan. That was as far as my career plan went.
That was the full
Um,
objective.
I was young, right? I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And I think though, in all seriousness, I think of myself as pretty fortunate in that I didn't feel early in my career, I didn't feel pressure from my family, from my culture, from myself to be a particular something. Like I didn't feel pressure to go into tech or to medicine or to law or so I had this sort of freedom, I guess, to go where I thought sounded interesting or seemed like I could use my skills and my capabilities. And I think what that did was opened me up to the opportunity to work at a company like Google at a time when my country was being invested in by tech companies. So Ireland was just starting to be sort of opened up to tech companies coming in. Tech companies themselves were starting to open up more globally. Google was a 1,500 person company when I joined it 20 years ago. It was a startup. So then the next question is, well, why did I stay? Why have I stayed so long? Um, and really, it's about two things, I would say. Can I keep learning and can I keep adding value? And I check in on that question very regularly with myself. I would say every few months. Am I learning? Am I adding value? And they have been questions that have guided me all through the last 20 years. And the answer, thankfully, in a company like this has been yes. It's involved me changing roles, moving countries, trying new things. But I've always been able to answer yes to those two questions when I asked them. So it didn't set out to be a 20-year journey. I don't know where the journey will go next, but it's been a fun ride. And yeah, I'd be very fortunate to have been on the roller coaster.
Yeah, and I think those two questions you asked yourself is a really interesting point, and thanks for sharing with the audience and also with me, because I think sometimes we go more for the first question, can I learn? But sometimes we miss a bit the point that put more value in ourselves also, no? Like, okay, maybe I've been here, I'm comfortable, but I feel this is not my place anymore, even if I'm in a more comfortable position. But there are opportunities outside also where you can feel that I'm adding value. I think that's also super, powerful to make you feel comfortable in your daily job, like that. So those two questions I think are really interesting.
Yeah, and if I could just add one thing on it, I would say
Sure.
I don't think any of us can predict, right? There's the illusion of control. We think we know where a job is going or where a career is going, but in reality, we don't, right? So I think there's this piece around being willing to stay adaptable, and particularly in tech, where there's a lot of change happening, usually quite rapidly. So being willing to adapt and being willing to stay open to learning new things, trying new things, and what I've been learning or where I've been adding value has changed dramatically through the last 20 years. The things I was doing 20 years ago are not the things I'm doing today. So although those questions may have stayed with me through my time, the answer to them and the way I've approached them has changed dramatically, I would say.
Yeah, indeed. And now, can we conclude, and also based on your previous answer, can we conclude that the tech career is not predictable?
That's the thing. I don't think any career is predictable. And I would say perhaps even more so now that traditionally non-tech roles or companies are becoming more tech forward. So digital transformation is happening everywhere. So if you think of medicine, where maybe in 100 years ago you may not have thought of it as particularly tech forward, well now look at what's happening in the medical field, right? And many of you may work in that field and know it more than me, but I think, of course, it's unpredictable. It's always pushing the boundaries, I think, just by the very nature of what tech does and how it evolves. And there's no industry that's untouched, I would say. So
yeah, I for sure, I think try to predict anything nowadays is impossible. And also maybe the point is lose a bit the fear to don't be able to predict, no? Because you can feel unsafe if you are not able to have kind of a more clear path what you are going to be in some time. Yeah, also try to enjoy the trip instead of being looking always forward, no? Like what is going to be next and learning from it. So yeah, nice,
yeah,
nice answer.
I think there was a recent piece of work done by Microsoft. I'm happy to share the link afterwards if it's useful, but they talked about career journeys as a climbing wall or a playground. So if you keep that image in your head, that it's no longer this sort of linear up and to the right. And that really resonates with me. It may be different in some other companies or industries, but this ability to sort of use your strengths and your experiences and your interests to like take on the next challenge in the playground or go to a different area of the playground, I think is something that's really appealing to me and has been very appealing to me. And particularly in a faster moving industry where new opportunities are opening up all the time.
Yeah. Now moving a bit, you mentioned in your introduction of what is tech, or in your explanation of what is tech, that tech is everywhere. That is not a kind of any sector or any moment where tech is not involved somehow. So looking to it a bit more in the industry or business related topic, like how relevant is to have a good collaboration between the tech and the non-tech departments in a company like Google, in which you are, for example. So how that goes, because I can assume typically you are in the not technical specialist departments. So how those communications go and how you relate between each other?
Yeah, it's a great question. And of course, during my time, I've spent much of my time working with either our product and engineering teams in various different ways, either building new systems for our operations or building new user experiences through our products. So it's critical, right? Because if you're designing a technical solution for an end user, you need to understand what that end user needs, right? So be it an internal user of your company or department, if you're building internal systems, or of course, if you're going out to market with an external product or solution. And so, yes, we might speak different languages as such in our day-to-day work, but there's always a need or an importance for us to bridge that. And I think those of us who can look at it essentially from the perspective of who are we solving for, what are we solving for, and sit down and say, okay, collectively we're working together across perhaps business operations and technical functions to solve for an end user, to solve for a customer, and have that joint mission and joint sort of set of responsibilities, then it becomes much easier, in my view, to have the conversations that are necessary, to do the research, to do the testing, whatever it be. Um, so to me, it's always been about understanding what you're solving for, who you're solving for, and then sitting down with the right people to have the right conversations, even if you're both coming from a slightly different perspective or set of experiences or language.
Yeah, so having technology with a purpose, no? Like not one department can just go about, let's create applications, but we don't know for what, or the other departments, let's put money here, but we don't know if it's going to solve something. So everyone should sit in the table, and it's, I think there are always kind of jokes in companies about how every department communicate, or if you are a tech specialist, you are going to communicate in a way. If you are a financial specialist, you are going to communicate in a way. So it's but this conversation should be, how to say, like, should be sanitary, like for the company, like to be able to put the right people in the right place and be able to communicate all each other, like have this thing in mind that is not just you are pushing, not just for your department and interest, but at the end, the win of the company is the win for everyone. Also, in
Right.
that sense, if all the small pieces match.
Right. If you think about it, internal company structures are human made, right? They're
Yeah.
there by virtue of however that company decides to organize itself. But ideally, you are a company that's working towards the same mission for your customers, for your users. And with that, then in today's world where technology is sort of interlinked everywhere, you have to be able to sit down together and be aiming for the same goals.
Yeah. And now, because I see we have a bit of extra time, maybe a question that come to my mom now. During your career, you have changed a lot of times. Maybe you can share with the audience kind of yeah, like the big challenge you have, like one in the moments you change your role, you start the new position, and you really said, whoa, what I am right now, what I have to do, why I decide this. Like, have you experienced those moments of, this is completely new, what is going on, and how you face them, how you go for them?
Yeah, great question. And the answer might be slightly different in different situations. So I could share a few, but if I look back earlier in my career, I think my transitions were a bit more opportunistic and less intentional. And I say that because I think I was fortunate enough to be working in a rapidly changing environment where
Mm-hmm.
the business was growing very fast and opportunities were coming up all the time. And I think in those instances, it was more of a mindset of, I'm generally an optimist, right? So I'm usually looking at situations from a positive perspective. So as these opportunities evolved, I saw them as positives. Like, how could I learn something? How could I add value? And also, I would say they were, I don't know, just ways in which I could say yes, default to yes. And so, and it can be scary and it can be frightening and you don't really know where it's going to go. But I think that was the adventure and the independent values that I hold in me, being willing to step into something unknown. But all through those early steps, there was always something connecting. So thinking about the value question, like, what experience do I have that I can bring to this situation? And then what are the unknowns that I'll have to learn along the way? And I think that has very much stayed true over the last sort of 10 years, where I feel like my career changes were a bit more intentional. So when I look to the more intentional changes, I just understood myself a little bit better as I got
Mm-hmm.
older, as I got more experienced. I understood more about what type of work I really enjoyed. I understood more about what type of work I was good at. I understood more about how to make transitions well. So the power of mentors, the power of time, giving yourself time to look around, see what's available, what work do I need to do to get there. And finally, I would say from an intentionality perspective, in each of my transitions, it's always been about thinking about those transferable skills, the new pieces I'll have to learn, and what am I willing to tolerate essentially to get there. So it might be waiting longer. I've had to wait for work visas to move to the US. I've had to wait for maybe headcount to open before I can transition to a team. The role I'm in right now, I was talking to this team 3 years ago. So I think there's always some level of trade-off or tolerance that you'll have to have as you think about any transition that you're going to make in life or in career. Um, I always had what I would call a nice to have checklist and a must have checklist. So, what are the things I really want to get from my next move? And at certain points in my career, they have been geographic location change. They have been maybe working for a different type of leader. They have been perhaps working in a different part of the company to learn a new skill set.
Mm-hmm.
Or so I think having some level of homework that you have done to understand both yourself and your capabilities and your experience, to understand what you're looking for from your next opportunity, and then the willingness to trade off or tolerate some level of time, work, new skill development that you need to do to get there.
Really interesting answer, and I hope the audience make a note about the checklist, because I think that's a super interesting point. Like to also have clear what do you want for yourself, not just I need to move. I don't like what I'm doing now. Let's pick something, because I think it's really important. Also, I'm see myself a bit on the opportunistic part instead of the where the period you are now. I think that's normal when you start your career, no? Because you need to discover also where do you feel comfortable with which task, with which kind of teams, which responsibilities, and also when you join big companies, I think you can feel really overwhelming by all the different positions that are available, and typically the descriptions or when you talk with people you can expect something, but then you really need to put hands on, and then is when you realize, oh, I feel nice or not in this position. So yeah, also kind of a message of it's normal, it happens, you will learn, and yeah, I think for the like new generations, that's a really important message. Like also give time things to set up in your mind, to know yourself, and to really get a bit of experience to then have a better way to decide about your next step. So that's
Yeah.
also, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like I said, maybe the first 10 years or so, it was very much following a gut instinct. I think I like this. I think I'm interested in this. That team over there is doing something kind of cool. So it was that more opportunistic kind of flavor that I explained. And then you touched on the values that lead me. So learning and relationships and adventure and independence. Like I've only been able to put words to those maybe over the last 5 or 6 years. If I look back on my career, yes, I think they were always present, but I didn't maybe have the words to explain them or to clarify them for myself. So I think doing that work, and someone in the chat mentioned techniques that I've used, I think doing the work to even just document daily, like what's giving me energy, what tasks do I like, what tasks do I not like. That's a technique. It seems simple, but it's a technique. The values work, there's tons of online tools that you can use to understand your values, and gives you a clear communication channel to have with your managers or your mentors. Like, I value learning. I'm not learning in this role anymore. What can I do about it? Helps you just create signposts, I guess, to where you might go next.
Really nice input. So now I would like to close this conversation before we move to the questions of the audience, focusing a bit more on the gender gap aspect. So at the end, we are women in tech. So I will also like to know your opinion here. So do you see a lot of difference in terms of the gap gender difference between, let's say, your first day in the company and nowadays? Yeah, and do you think that if a woman have success in her career, and I can refer even to you because I think, or at least for me, you represent that, they are aware the role they have to help or to make aware others that they have the same opportunities if they go for them.
Yeah. I mean, look, in an ideal world, we would just, gender wouldn't be an issue, right? We all know that.
Yeah.
We would just be like, what are you capable of and what do you want to do, right? And in reality, that's not the case. And it will take a lot of work for some time to come for that to be the case, as we all know. Look, if I think about it, 20 years ago, it wasn't really even a conversation, certainly in Google or in other areas. And if I think back to even finishing school, when I was thinking of becoming a firefighter, when I spoke with the fire services, they were like, oh, you're kind of young and a woman of your age, we probably wouldn't really recruit, right? So, and at the time, that just seemed like a normal response for me to receive. When I think back on it, they're like, that's not acceptable. Like, what does it matter what my gender is? Like, it should just matter whether I'm capable. If I think of the last 20 years, though, both in tech and in many industries, and certainly internally here, the conversation is constant. And that's good, right? We're constantly thinking about diversity in general, not just gender. We're constantly thinking about where we need to update our own behaviors, our processes, our approaches. And again, that wasn't really a conversation. Even 10 years ago, 8 years ago, it wasn't really a conversation. And now it's constant. We're embedding it into everything that we do, from our hiring, from our management techniques, from our training, from our pure day-to-day conversations. And that to me is a positive. Doesn't mean we're perfect, doesn't mean we're there yet. And I know in some companies and some industries, they may be even further behind. So then to your second question of the role we all play, I think it's down to accountability, right? So holding each other accountable, to push on others, right? If my husband or my colleagues say something that I don't feel is right, I will hold them accountable and I will say something. I won't stay silent anymore. And I think perhaps I would have in the past because I wasn't perhaps comfortable enough or educated enough in my own knowledge or to my own confidence to say something. That's not the case anymore. I've become much more confident to hold others accountable and myself accountable to what I'm doing to support women, to sort of remove the gender biases from our conversations and our actions. Again, am I perfect? No. So I set myself goals to continue to learn in this area and other areas of diversity. I will say in some of the work that I did with In Touch, the female leadership class that I took in the Netherlands, this concept of crab basket came up, and I'd never heard of this before. And where we as women sometimes can pull other women down, right? So crabs in a basket will almost pull each other down from trying to escape the basket, right? And I think it just opened my eyes to the fact that that's a reality. Sometimes we as women aren't supporting other women as much as we could, for various reasons. And so again, accountability. What am I doing? So I coach women leaders. I coach women who are setting up their business or thinking about their career. I sponsor women in many different aspects here internally. So yeah, very long answer, but I think I'm glad that it's a conversation now where it wasn't in the past. I think there's still a ton of work to do. We're all accountable, be male, female, or other. And yeah, it's just always going to be a constant piece of work.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, fully agree, and I hope it's also a bit of inspiration for the audience to keep having the conversation and to keep helping, encouraging the others around them to go for it.
Yeah,
Thank you, Caroline.
the comment around the gender pay gap there, like, I mean, it's absolutely right. We've seen the data, the recent reports, right? How long it's actually going to take to close that gender pay gap doesn't mean we should stop pushing, right? Stop asking the questions. Like, we could continue to ask those questions and push for parity. So yeah, I think there's so much more work to do, and complacency isn't going to solve it, right? So
yeah, I think there will be not soon a pause, so should keep pushing for it, for sure.
yeah.
Nice. So now I would like to move to some of the questions of the audience. So I'm going to pick the first one in the chat and pop out. So it says, someone tell you you are not tech enough for a management profile because you don't have an IT degree, and what was your answer? From Antonella.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I've ever been overtly told that, but I think there's areas where I've entered more technical fields, right? So I will say, in my time working in a field services role, I had technicians that were out in the field installing our products and services. So very technical role, and I was responsible for ensuring their operations were working. So it was less about a job position, but I had a customer say to me once, they asked me if I was just there to look pretty. So that was a very overt sort of insult to my capability. And my answer was, no, I'm actually here in charge of the operation to ensure that you as a customer have the best possible experience. So I think we'll always encounter some level of pushback, particularly if people have an assumption around what makes us capable for the work that we're doing. And the incorrect assumption is on them. So our job is to respond and educate them as to actually why you're actually here, what makes us competent. And you either show them through the actual tangibles of your work, or you verbally have to say it. And I think don't be shy, don't be ashamed of standing up for what you're capable of and why you're in a position.
And also to add here, at least my point of view is that nowadays, even if you have a technology background and a technology degree, when you are in your position, there are so much details, topics, specializations. It's impossible to be a specialist in everything. So I think also when you move to a position like a manager, part of your work is to find a team that can support you in the different topics that are incorporating your position. So you should not be an expert in everything. I mean, it's sometimes if you try to follow all the conversations that are going around your colleagues, you will see, oh, now I'm focused on this action. I should be kind of the expert in this topic, but I cannot try to be the expert in all the things that are going on. So also you should not feel it's not the responsibility of knowing everything. You can also rely on people that will help you to understand at least the high level idea of what is going on.
Right. And I remember during my time in finance, so in college studying accounting, economics, hated them, swore that I would never work in the finance field. I was there for 8 years. And it was because I brought other capabilities to what the team needed. And I remember having a conversation with a manager at the time about, I need to become more analytical. I don't know, this is 12 years ago, maybe. I need to be able to do everything my financial analysts do. And he just said, no, you don't. He said, you need to hire the best possible analysts in your team. And that was just a revelation for me that, to your point, I didn't have to be everything that my team needed me to be. Needed to be. They needed me to be something different for them. They needed me to be a good manager, to be a good leader, to be setting a vision, to be building out sort of our operational strategy. And they could be the analysts they needed to be. So that was revelatory for me, that, to your point, you don't need to be everything. And it's just impossible. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
So know what you're good at, find the roles that will help you sort of build that capability or use that capability and enjoy it. Yeah.
Now we move to another question, a bit more open broad. So let me pop it up here. So Shiva asks, how do you overcome difficulties stopping you to achieve your goals?
Yeah.
Give us some tips.
There's always, and I'm sure the group here could share a million of them. If I think of some of the difficulties in my navigating my career, at one point I felt really stuck from a promotion perspective. I felt like I had all the experience, I had the scope of my role. I was looking around the table, at the level up, and there was no space for me, and it was getting frustrating. I felt like I had the capability, but I didn't have the opportunity. And so, in that regard, what I regret not doing was having a conversation with my manager. I thought, they'll never solve it for me. I need to go and do something myself. And what I did was I started looking for a new role. I looked for an opportunity where there was more growth in a business area so that I could potentially grow into that next level opportunity. And I did, and I got the opportunity and I got the promotion, and that was all fine. Took about 2 or 3 years, by the way. So again, being willing to wait, being as long as you feel like you're on the right track and you're in the right area of the playground. But I say I regret not talking to my manager about it because maybe they could have done something. Maybe if they'd understood my goals, they would have, been able to support me in a different way, and I wouldn't have left the team. But I did, and so it was, and I was particularly happy, and that was okay. So I think to sort of answer your question more briefly, one is talk to those around you, your managers, your mentors, your colleagues. What is it that's getting in the way of your goal? Don't be shy about having those conversations. They'll either support you, in which case, great, or they won't, and in which case you're sort of adding information or answers to your situation.
To answer
right?
yourself how it's going to happen. Yeah.
Right. And when I did open up the conversation with that manager at the time, what they did was phenomenal. They wrote me this amazing letter of referral for the new hiring manager, and I got the new job. So they weren't able to offer me the promotion I wanted, but they were able to help me get my next role. And I wish I'd had that conversation sooner. So I think talking to people is one thing. Again, being really clear on what you want and what you're willing to do to get there. So what is it that's getting in the way of your goal? What are the different ways that you could potentially overcome it? And what might be the work that you're willing to do to get there? Another example being, I mentioned earlier, 3 years ago, I wanted to get into the world of people, right? I had just finished my coaching certification. It was an area that I hadn't really explored yet, but I felt really passionate about. And at the time, they were saying, well, you don't really have experience in the people organization. We don't really have anything for you. And I went and I did a postgraduate diploma in organizational change and transformation. I took a 6-month, that was a year of work. I took a 6-month sort of temporary trial role to see if I could succeed in the area. So I was willing to experiment and try new things and do new work to build up capability in a new area. And then I felt more confident and qualified to go and explore new roles in that new department that I'd never worked in before. So I don't know, talking to people, being clear on your goals, what's the work you're willing to do to overcome your goals, and looking for the support that you need to get there.
Perfect sum up. Make notes, all the people in the audience that is looking for a change, make a note, write down, apply it. Maybe let's see, for sure we have time for another question at least. So I'm going to show you this question. So Mohana Priya, sorry if I pronounce incorrectly the names. So she's asking, it is necessary to downgrade positions due to a career break. And that's, I guess, involves typically women due to, imagine be a mom, or that's a typical example where sometimes you need to put some time, or at least, you need some rest for sure. So, or other scenarios where you need to stop for a moment and then you will come back to your job.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I would say it's not even just relevant to career breaks, but there might be times where you downgrade positions for various reasons. And again, I think it comes back to, where do you want to go and what are you willing to do to get there? I have two kids. I've taken two career breaks through maternity leave. Both times I was able to come back into my position. I didn't have to downgrade, or there was nothing. In fact, that would be illegal here in Ireland. Um, so so from a maternity leave, that wasn't a particular concern of mine. However, I did leave Google for a year about 15 years ago. I really wanted to take time off to do some traveling. It's a very, I don't know, it was a personal thing. I never got that trip to Australia, so I wanted to go and do it. Um, and I felt like, again, I'd reached a point where it was the right time, and I wanted to trust my gut. So I share that story though, because when I came back to Ireland, I wanted to come back to Google, right? Because I valued the company and I enjoyed my time here. And they didn't have a role for me at the time. So I took a temporary contract with them and came back that way. And then when roles opened up, I applied for them and came back. So it was a downgrade in position essentially after a career break, and it was because of circumstance. There wasn't a role for me to apply to. They didn't have the headcount, but I really wanted to come back and I was willing to take that contract. Another example, about 3 years ago, when I was looking for new roles, I was moving from the US back to Ireland, and I had been a manager and a leader for years, but I saw this role that involved coaching. It was based in Ireland. I wanted to come back to Ireland. I could use my new skills as a coach, but it was an individual contributor role. So I would have to give up being a people manager. And I did it because it felt like the role, the location, the opportunity was right for me. So some people might see it as a downgrade to go from manager
Yeah,
back to
that's
individual contributor. But to me, it was like the best role I could
yeah. For you,
possibly
was
get at
not a
that time.
defeat; was a celebration. Like I'm
Right.
doing the next step. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I'm back managing people because I've moved into a new role where it requires global management. So I don't think it's ever necessary because the system is forcing me, but I think it's sometimes been necessary because of the path I want to go on. But it's,
Yeah.
again, being quite intentional decision making.
Yeah, and then think here we have a lot of stigma in looking for career evolution and career projection in terms of where you are in the pyramid, no? Like the higher the better, but it's also what I feel the most about me, what I feel the most comfortable, the most happy. So sometimes you could, as you mentioned, like for example, apart from a moment, your team leadership responsibilities, but then you incorporate something new that you think is the moment to do it. So that will be something that fits better what Caroline right now. So yeah, I think this is a topic that should be more talking about, like should be more open, and there should be more examples, because I'm sure there are thousands of examples of people that prioritize not just the how it looks, but the real the real feeling okay with what I'm doing. So
Right.
thanks for sharing. I think it's really nice.
Yeah. And not to be naive, right? There are potentially
Yeah.
companies or industries where, they will potentially try and take advantage of someone being on a career break. But I think wherever you're
Oh, for sure.
based, know your rights, know legally what's required of the company to support you in taking that career break, and ensure that you push for what you're entitled to so that it's not, impacting your career in a negative way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's time. So sorry for those questions that we didn't reach, but from my side, Caroline, has been a pleasure to have you here. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope also I'm having a look in the comments. I think the audience also enjoy it. But thank you again for joining us today in this Lunch and Learn session. Yeah, I will say that if the audience wants to know more about Caroline career, you can look around in LinkedIn, and of course also if you have some more interest in women in tech, the Netherlands or the global movement, you can also reach us in LinkedIn. And I don't know if you want to add something else, Caroline.
Oh, look, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I am very happy if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, happy to chat in any way. And I hope some of my experience was useful for you, and lots of great questions. So thank you for engaging in this forum.
So with that, thank you everyone for being here in this session, and see you more or less in 1 month with the next Lunch and Learn session. Bye.
Bye. Take care, everyone.